Salvē, Mika, and welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at, unfortunately, this is going to be a long one, sorry, my fault for the Greek, but John chapter 4 verses 31 through 34. It's going to be a while, yeah. Wasn't paying attention somehow when I was doing the last Greek video, and so I went through the, first 3 verses before realizing anything. Might as well finish it. Anyway, last time on John chapter 4 of the Latin. And there we have it. Here's a rubric, everything that we look through for as we go through the text. Let's get started. Inter rea rogabant eum discipuli, dicentes, Rabbi, manduca. Illi autem dixit eis ego cibum habeo manducare, quem vos nescitis. Dicebant ergo discipuli ad inviciem, num quid aliquis ad tulit ei manducare. Dicit eis Jesus, meos cibus est ut faciam voluntatem eius, qui missit me ut perficiam opus eius. And there we have it. Inter ea is just an adverb telling us time. This means meanwhile, or in the between that. Rogabant are, of course, third person plural, imperfect, active, and indicative, comma. So then we want to know who our subject is. We've got with eum, our accusative, singular, masculine, direct object from is, ea, id. Discipuli, with that long I right there, fits for rogabant's subject, as we've seen before. We don't need to parse that. And then dicentes, es right there, which is going to be long with the nt off of dic, our stem, tells us that this is going to be, of course, nominative, plural, masculine, present, active, participle. Masculine because discipuli are masculine. Saying, comma, enter quote marks, and then we have Rabbi here. And normally, I think in the past, we have just skipped over words like this, except saying, well, it doesn't decline. But I put the time for this video and for the Greek video. If you watched it, you just skip ahead a bit to look up what the actual form of Rabbi is, what it actually means, which is something that I wish I had done kind of from the beginning, but then that would have meant before I knew anything about Hebrew except that my computer had the keyboard for it installed. Would have taken forever to figure it out. But Rabbi, what this comes from is the Hebrew word, as far as I'm aware anyway. Well, I guess I'm writing it backwards. Rav. Resh Beit. With, I don't remember what that accent's called, what that vowel is called. And this just means chief, which is why we see elsewhere in John, I think the first time we ran into this, that it is translated as magister, which means, of course, master or teacher. But this form that we have here is Rabbi. So we have resh, and then the beit gains that mark in there, which what it's called is it doubles the consonant. So rather than the v sound that we get with this undoubled beit, we get b sound, and it's also becomes 2 b's, hence RBB in the English. And then, of course, this hirak yod, that's a very ugly yod, I'm sorry, is actually a possessive pronoun. It's going to be the first common singular pronoun. So actually what rabbi means, rather than just what we say in English is my chief, or my master, or my teacher. So now you know. This is something that I will try to remember to do as we going forward, though there aren't that many Hebrew words in Greek other than the names. And normally things like Peter, well, that's Greek. It's just Petros, or I don't know if Latin borrows Peter, but it means rock or pebble, as you know. So in a comma right there, because this is going to be, of course, in the vocative use, even though it doesn't decline, because Rav doesn't decline in Hebrew. Then we got manduka with that A right there, which is a second singular off of manduko, our present stem. Of course, O is the first person singular, and it is active, and it is an imperative. Our quote ends right there, as you can see from Dixit. And this just means to munch on something, or really, in the context, eat. End quote. Ille autem, nominative singular masculine, as we've seen before from ille, illa, illud. Autem can mean however or now, and I think I'm gonna try to distinguish between the howevers and the nows of autem from this point on. And I think a however is actually appropriate in this instance. That man, to be more precise. Dixit, it right there, I've seen it before, no need to parse. Likewise with ace, but with ego, we get the start of a direct quote. Ego is, of course, emphatic. It's unnecessary since in, we see here with habeo, we already have our first person singular. And then this one's a direct object, which we see with kibum, um right there. However, even though we have this accusative singular, and kibus, kibum, masculine, I think, we have mandukare with re of a present active infinitive, which could also be our direct object. So it could be, I myself have to eat food, which is kind of awkward in English, and I don't think gets across the idea of what he's actually saying here. Or we could have, I myself have food to eat. And to eat here would be almost a purpose following kibum rather than being the object of habeo, and in turn having kibum as its object, which infinitives can have object. So I think I'm going to go with kibum, then mandukare, following that for clarity in English. Quem, referring back to kibum. And with that em, of course, accusative, singular, masculine to match the number and the gender. The case, of course, is determined by the clause in which it resides, which, and this clause with nescitis, tis right there, and vos, which is going to be a nominative plural. Nescitis, a second person plural, present tense, active, and indicative, will then dictate that quem has to be the object. You, again, unnecessary, therefore emphatic. And then nescio is just skio, but not using the word non. Instead, it gets the prefix ne. Do not know. Or we could say understand. Dicebant, bant right there tells us that our direct discourse ends right here, and bant we've seen before with that, so I'm not going to parse it again. Therefore, discipuli, that long I right there for our subject. And then we get a bit of a curiosity. I don't know if we've run into this, but it pops up a few times in John, at least as far as I have read it through the Latin of John. And it, in wicem, is of course with a preposition, and that preposition is the type that normally takes the accusative, but in wicem is this curious thing that serves two purposes on its own. It is an adverb when it stands alone, and when it's an adverb it means alternatively. When it is with a preposition, and odd is by far not the only preposition it'll appear with. The dictionary that I looked at, I think it also appears with ob, and I think one other, maybe in, maybe not, I don't remember. But when it's with a preposition, of course it takes the preposition meaning, and then it transforms itself from being alternatively to mean one another, so we could say to one another, and then numquid is not part of that. Comma, comma, and then numquid is a particle that Latin uses to introduce questions, and I think we talked about this in either the last Latin video or the video before, and I've already expressed my less than convincedness to invent a word, which I definitely don't have the notoriety or authority to do, for the expecting a negative of numquid. However, since I've already gone through the Greek, I know that in this case it does in fact expect a negative, because we get the particle in Greek me, which is the type of particle that introduces a negative expectant question. So we'll have to figure out how to say that in Latin. Aliquis, note that the ale has not dropped out here, even though it's coming after a form of num, which is very strange, honestly. That almost always happens. So, unusual occurrence, take note of that. Aliquis, is right there, of course, is going to be the nominative singular, either masculine or feminine ending. It's imprecise. Ad tulit is our verb it for the third person singular, and no, it's not present. Affero, affere, atuli, alatum. So this is actually going to be the perfect stem, and this is one of those verbs where you don't have one verb form to make all of them. Instead, it's a couple different verbs who have lost some of their forms by lack of use, and those forms have been replaced by others. So pharaoh, its perfect form and its perfect passive forms have fell out of use and were replaced by tulit, or tuli, and latum. And then we just got that prefix on there. Active and indicative. I think even in the Greek, in the Greek it's the same way, because it's phago oiso, phero oiso enenkan, which is just weird, because oiso has nothing to do with pharaoh, which is definitely has some relation to the Latin pharaoh, and then enenkan, where the heck did that come from? Anyway, ei, this is of course our dative singular, don't need to parse it. Manducari, right there for our present active infinitive again. So then how do we say this? Surely someone hasn't brought him to eat, something to eat. We could put it that way, or someone hasn't brought him something to eat. Have they? Nah. A lot of what it would be in a negative expectant question is the intonation of how you say it in English. So it's kind of hard to translate them clearly, and it's hard for me. Maybe isn't for you. That would be nice. That'd be very good for you. Anyway, someone. Maybe it's a mental condition I have. And we're going to have to supply our own word for something. It is just assumed in the Latin. And then what would that be? I think it'd be aliquid. Probably. Though knowing Latin, probably just quid. There we go. Verse 34, Dicit tells us that our direct discourse is ended here. Don't need to parse, don't need to parse, don't need to parse. Meos kibos begins our direct discourse with est right there. So, quote mark. Jumping to our verb est, we've seen this before too many times. If you don't know that one, shame on you. Meos kibos, us and us right here. They go together as our subject. Then ut. Ut introducing what is probably a purpose clause, though since this is mimicking the Greek, there will be times, not mimicking, translated Greeks, there will be times when ut is stretched so that it can introduce a, I think, direct discourse statement. But I don't think that's what we have here. Instead, meos kibos is being connected to the phrase of ut. My food, and it's a very strange phrase, honestly, is, in order to, with faciam, am right there, this could be the future tense, or it could be subjunctive. Ut expects a subjunctive, so that's probably what it is. Faciam is actually another one of those verbs, like pharaoh, where it's one form of it has fallen out of use, or at least a way of using it has fallen out of use, so that it's replaced by something else, and that would be the verb fio. Fio replaces most of the passive forms of facio, except factum. Factum shows up a lot. And then direct object, voluntatem, em right there for the accusative, singular, feminine, tatis verb. Eius, we've seen from is, id, is just our genitive, singular, onum voluntatem. Qui introduces a a relative clause, so this is where this ends. There's nothing modifying voluntatem. Do will of him. Him who? Well, qui refers back to eius in nominative singular, because misit, it right there, that third singular perfect tense, active and indicative. I keep forgetting to speak louder because of Phrygius over there. And nominative singular to match that, and it's going to be masculine, is the I right there. Of him who sent me as a accusative object of misit, and singular. Ut, another ut clause. Perficiam, am right there is going to match faciam in its form, so I'm going to draw that down. Opus, we already have our subject with perficiam, that am, so opus is going to be our accusative, singular, neuter object. This, of course, opus, operus, and then eius owning that as another genitive, singular. And ut is just a repetition of this ut, almost acting as a conjunction in this case. So I'm going to say and that. And then perficiam is one of those words that means what it looks like. To perfect, to make complete. And there we have it. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm not going to go through and review it one more time. I hope taking a look at this has been helpful for you, and sorry for the very long video. Blame my Greek version. You have a very good day. Wale.